Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pianist Academy. I am Szczepanek. It's good to see you all here for another live stream masterclass. Hello to Prashant. I think you were here before we started. And Antonio, welcome. Jess, welcome. Quentin Grand, good to see you. David, welcome. XZY, welcome. Bedlington Groomer, hello. Sir Wolseley, awesome. Good to see you, Sir Wolseley. And OCD King. Wonderful. Great to see everybody here. We've got quite a lot of stuff to go through today, so we're going to jump right in. And so congratulations to Quentin. This is your first submission. Awesome. Thanks so much for sending in some of your playing. We're going to have a great time hearing you and working on some Chopin together. Hello, Nancy. Your notifications finally worked. Yay! All right, let's jump in. Quentin is playing Chopin's Etude, Opus 10, number 3, very famous one. As if they're not all of that. They're all pretty famous, but maybe this is probably one of the most famous of the 24. All right, here we go. Let me cue it up, and we'll listen to Quentin play. Wonderful, Quentin. Let's give Quentin a round of applause in the chat, can we? Nice stuff. If you know the piece really well, you'll know that Quentin only played basically the first page and the last page. We skipped the middle two. But hopefully, we'll hear the middle two from you someday, Quentin. That would be great. There we go. Awesome. Yes, lots of great comments coming in. Well deserved. Let's kick this off. You might already know this, Quentin, but I don't know if everybody does. This piece is nicknamed Tristesse, which means sadness. Did Chopin give the piece that nickname? No. He didn't. That was from someone else. But we do know, in fact, Sir Wolseley kind of said something like this. Sir Wolseley said, the most beautiful melody ever written. Chopin himself was extremely proud of this piece in particular. And he thought, even over the course of his life, that it was one of the most beautiful melodies that he had written. So, about that title, Sadness, does the piece really mean sadness? Let's have a real quick discussion about that, and then we're going to get into, Quentin, exactly some details about your playing. So, the tempo marking on the top is actually eighth note equals 100. I'll show you sheet music in just a minute, but no one plays eighth note equals 100. Let me actually, Yeah, here's what that would sound like. You never hear that. It's always played so much slower. And the tempo marking that Chopin wrote is lento, ma non troppo, which means slowly but not too slow. Interesting. And if we actually know what was on the manuscript before that tempo marking, Chopin had actually marked it vivace ma non troppo, so fast, but not too fast. That's really interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard a recording that actually plays it near the tempo of 100 to the eighth note. So we're not going to really get into that because I think that's good enough. We can make our own interpretive judgments from there. Yeah, so Sir Wolsey, you're saying, curious, because it's supposed to be very fast. This is one of those things where what's on the manuscript is so different from pretty much every recording we've heard for the last 100 years that we're in a place that if a professional tried to record it at 100, eighth note equals 100, they might be ripped apart by critics. Critics who probably don't know what Chopin actually wrote on the page, so I don't know if we'll ever hear a recording that follows that tempo marking. Antonio, that's great. Okay, Quentin, let's dive into a couple things about your playing. First off, you're doing a lot of rubato, little micro bits of rubato. And I think we could really benefit from ironing some of those out and making it a little bit more smooth. So I'll show the score in a minute, but just listen for a second. Right now, Quentin, what you're doing is so there's movement through each micro phrase, and that is nice. One of my teachers that I had would have, and in fact, I used to do a little bit of this when I was studying. He would have told me I was making him seasick because the rubato was way too much in one direction and then way too much in the other direction, and we would keep going back and forth the whole time. And so while each phrase can have some of that movement and that push and pull, I think it would be really important for us to, first, depending on how long you've been working on this, maybe we need to experience it being played very straight, still musically, but with let's say no or next to no rubato through the phrase. So make all of your musicality with tempo changes. Let me see if I can do a little bit of that for you. Keep going. So there was our first main phrase. Can we really smooth out that rubato so that we're fully in control of the push and the pull that we take, and that we're taking it for a truly emotional reason? So that's the first thing. And I would really suggest, depending on how this goes in your practice, if you can do that instantly first time, then you don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Sometimes when we get in the habit of playing something and we're used to playing it, and I think I saw you're playing it from memory, so there's something's very ingrained in us, and that's good. But that can also mean if we're trying to remove some of those ingrained bits, it can take extra work. So if you can do it on one time through and you feel like, make a recording of yourself and listen back for these pushes and pulls, because that's easier to hear back when you're not actively playing. So make a recording, listen to just a phrase or two, see if we can get them perfectly linear in time, yet still have a shape dynamically. Yeah? Okay, second up after that, now I will show us the score. Okay. As usual, in a whole lot of Chopin, we have a combination of hairpins and dynamic markings. Here we go. And like you have probably heard about, and we've talked about on the stream before, hairpins in Chopin, especially when they're like in these places up here, and I'm circling these in red, right? And then we have these, which are little emphasis marks. There are all kinds of interesting marks. And then the thing that gives it away is like we have an opening hairpin next to a crescendo. Chopin wouldn't be telling us to do the same thing twice, right? Okay, so all of those hairpins do mean a sense of push and pull through a phrase. And you're already doing some of that. So now we want to reintroduce only a little bit. Let's think about this as, even at a faster tempo, this is still something like a lullaby. So now each of the phrases, we're not getting stuck and we're not pausing in the middle, but we're going all the way to the conclusion of the phrase. Maybe the most apparent one is that last one I just played. If we sing it, the voice naturally wants to go into the second beat, or into the second half of the bar, yeah? It doesn't want to sing. It doesn't want to stop and start like that. So the voice can guide us in a great way. Yes? So as we reintroduce all of this rubato, just take a little bit at a time and make sure that we're not letting it disrupt the phrase. Yeah? So we still want to hear the connection of the phrase from the first note to the last note, within each slur and within the bigger picture as well. You know, I wanted to mention this, Quentin, because this etude, especially the outer sections, the A section at the beginning and at the end, unlike a lot of other Chopin etudes, this etude is really a study in separation of voices within the hand and how we phrase a beautiful melody and how we can bring that out among other textures. It's a study in pedaling. It's a study in, especially that voicing in a single hand. So when we have the right hand playing an accompaniment figure, so really being able to lean into that melody. I bring this up because you're already doing a very nice job of that. And that's usually one of the biggest reasons that we study this etude, is to learn the division in the hand and how we can rotate, especially to the outside of the hand, how we can place more weight on the melody, less on the accompaniment, and have that control. So you're already doing great with that. I didn't want to forget to mention that. Okay. After rubato, let's talk a bit about tone and a little bit of what you're doing with the hand as you play these phrases. So your right hand is nice and free and flexible most of the time, which is great. We're going to come back to that topic for the left hand in a bit, but sometimes I see you do a lot of release from the keyboard. So for example, and we do a lot of falling in on some of the melody notes. And sometimes those are accompanied with kind of an attack of the fingers. And it's pretty good technique. But I think, and this is kind of the opposite for people who've attended the streams here before, it's the opposite of what I tend to tell people. We need to focus on more legato with the fingers and a less height and dropping in from a shorter distance. So kind of minimizing, not getting rid of that part of our technique, because that's allowing us to be free, but minimizing it so that we have a warmer tone, so we're not dropping in from up high, we're not falling and kind of making that very pointed sound, but instead a warmer and softer. Sir Wolseley, yeah, this is a first. Yes, most of the time I see students that have the opposite problem. That's why I'm always kind of harping on release, release, release. Play, get rid of the tension, right? Quentin, you're already doing a great job of that. Now we need to incorporate feeling the same release that you get when you leave the keys, but feeling it staying connected. Now, the added bonus of this is also when we need to do a lot more pedaling. Let's say we need to pedal. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That bar, this is the third bar of the piece. You might take 5 pedals within that measure to keep it really clean. If we're not still connected in the keys, we're going to lose all that resonance, and we're going to lose the sustain, especially of the melody. Right? So, the one place we're going to get to where we can modify this will be toward the end of the page, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so Quentin, tone, and it corresponds with kind of the hand position and what we're doing with the right hand. So I'll still allowing that freedom, having a freedom in the wrist to release, but sometimes knowing that we cannot come out of the keys completely. So in fact, how much of this can we play if we don't take any pedal at all? It's not going to be fully legato because sometimes we have to replace the same finger twice, right? But you can try this also. How legato can you play, especially the top line? It's hard. And we're losing some of the inner voices gets a little clipped because we don't have a choice but to let them go. That's where the pedal comes in handy. But here we need to let go. And then 5, 4, 5 substitution, 3, all legatissimo. Go forward, no pedal. So it's still possible to play a bar like that. Yeah. See if you can try that out. And then that'll give you that feeling of sticking in the keys, and we're going to get a warmer tone as a byproduct of that. Okay, another thing, Quentin. This has to do a little bit with what we just talked about. But it's a bit of a different section. So we have octaves, a little bit of octaves and some chords, and it's the biggest moment in the 2A sections. So these moments right in the middle of the screen. This is the spot where we can have a bit more release. Let me show you a little bit bigger. So these octaves, if we really follow the articulation that Chopin marked, I'm flipping back and forth. But if we follow this, where all of these are released, they're short, they're written staccato, portamento in a sense. So they're all released. But if we don't make them such sharp releases, right? Portamento is usually more of a pressing with a softer release. So we can keep that happening where we attack each octave from top down but it's going to once again be a warmer tone. Then, if we go back and we play everything kind of with this pointed, even if I try to play that more quietly, we're going to lose the appropriate dynamic. We're going to lose the marking con forza with force, and it's still going to be a tonal color that's out of place for the beginning of the piece, right? So, can all of those releases be a little minimized? And then, in order to really sink into the resolution of this bar, if you feel like after all of these little, not pokes, but I think you know what I mean, this pressing forward and this intensification of emotion, after all of that, can we really try to play the fortissimo that's marked, but with mostly just weight, instead of a lot of fingers? Because a lot of fingers produces a really sharp and pointed tone. Mostly weight is going to produce a much warmer tone. And it's going to feel like, even though Chopin doesn't give us a whole big range of pitch, right? He could have easily written, and if it was that, of course, we could use a lot more finger engagement because it would fit. But here, sink in. Yes? A note about the bar previous. And maybe you don't do this all the time, Quentin, but you played a B natural over here, where I have it circled in blue. It's still B sharp. So let's make sure we get that one right. There it is. Okay. Great. I had one more thing to talk about. Thanks, Jack. One more thing for you, Quentin, and it corresponds with a bit of a question you had for me, because you mentioned that you already know your left hand has some issues, right? We've got a collapsing bridge in the left hand. So, something that you can think about doing that we've talked about on the stream before, I bet Sir Wolseley could even tell you what to do. We always want to maintain, right, a bit of a curved shape here. So one of the things that I like doing is taking the fingers of the other hand, gently apply them below these knuckles. Yes. We're not pushing up. Sir Wolseley, do you recognize this? I think I may have even told you this last year. We're not pushing up on these knuckles, Quentin, but we're just giving the sensation that there's some support here. Okay, and then when it comes to playing, can we play, let's say, the opening fifth? And if this hand is just a bit under the hand here, just giving a sensation, not pushing, just giving a sensation that's telling us these knuckles need to stay engaged and with structure, right? Can we do that? As opposed to if this hand isn't here, and this collapses like that, I wish I could zoom in on that, but I can't. That's a little bit of what's happening to us, Quentin, is that this piece of the knuckle is falling, and some of the other joints are coming above it, especially when you reach for bigger things like octaves. We lose that structure, right? So this can help a little bit. Another exercise I like to give people, usually, this actually comes from Liszt himself, and this usually helps more with the outermost joints in the finger and keeping them strong with structure, let's say. But if we take our thumb and start with our index finger, and we just bring them together like that, yes, and we can quickly pulse between the thumb and the index finger. You probably can't see that very well. Let's see about this angle. That might be a little bit better. But we can pulse between those two, and we're focusing on feeling the structure through all of this. So when we put force through the system, nothing collapses. We don't, and especially that joint right there. Yes? Last little tidbit that you can actually use to work on this within this piece. We have bars and bars. This is something to pay attention to actually musically as well as for this technical reason. But we have bars and bars with double stems in the bass. So I'm starting to put these in red. So all kinds of double stem notes. Each of those double stems is asking us to hold that bass note for the duration marked. Not only is this, well, this is important musically because if we're going to take extra pedals, like on this last E in the 16th, first half of the bar, if I take a pedal there, I don't want to lose the bottom note. So I have to be physically holding it. But in addition to that, we can also use the fifth finger throughout all of this as an anchor. So if the fifth finger is holding down, we can kind of rotate to the thumb, even if you're using the third finger. Fifth finger is going to be easier to feel this, but 5 plays, we've got good structure, and we just rotate to the thumb while we hold 5. So 5 is helping provide some of that structure. The further we spread, so doing this over a fifth is somewhat easy. As soon as we spread to an octave, it's much more difficult to maintain that structure, right? So we can get some great practice playing all of the fifths in this lower part, using 5 as a support, as an anchor, and feeling the hand supported through the fingertip of 5, and then moving away without losing that shape. It's going to take some really slow and focused practice to feel this not collapsing and throwing the fingers out. Yep. Quentin, does that all make sense? So Woolsey, that's a great comment about it. Makes a difference, the structure in the hand, right? Yes. So Quentin, you said it's harder to get structure on the big stretch. That is 100% true. It will always be harder. Even when you really understand how to do it, it's still going to be a lot harder. The further out the hand stretches, especially if you have things like a 10th, playing a 10th without collapsing and maintaining that structure so we have great control over both fingers, whatever your biggest reach is, that's always going to be the hardest interval to play with that structure. So if it's an octave, I know that there are probably people here where an octave is that largest interval for us, or maybe a 9th. That's always going to be more difficult to get the fingers to attack together, right? And to play with control, where we can really control the dynamic and the tone and the articulation of both fingers exactly how we want. So Woolsey said we can use flat fingers on big stretches so we can avoid collapsing. Flat fingers is it's an interesting concept because things can look relatively flat like this, but there's still structure. The moments that we can see where there absolutely isn't structure is if the bridge, if the biggest knuckles, if those are below the knuckles that follow, then there is no structure. Some, even really famous pianists, get away with stretching and a lack of structure by raising the wrist a ton. So they play an octave, and in a sense, they're supporting the fifth finger and the thumb the same way from the wrist down, and the wrist has this really high position, and you might see people play octaves, you know, like that, and the hand is kind of bouncing like this up the keys, and the wrist is super It's different than the mantis attack. I know what you're referring to, Sir Wolseley. The mantis attack is more like the fingers can very easily extend and pull back and retract, and there's no tension in that. Whereas this is kind of, in a sense, the hand is always under tension, the wrist is always under tension, and we don't have a bridge. We've shifted the bridge on purpose to be the wrist instead. I don't think that's ideal. I think some people have to do it if they have some smaller hands and they need to play some really powerful, fast octaves. Those are the cases where I've seen it used successfully by concert artists. If maybe an octave is their biggest stretch, then they don't have anything else bigger. Instead of just losing all power and playing with a broken bridge, we change where the bridge is to a higher point. If that isn't a problem, though, if we have a stretch that can reach an octave especially, there are absolutely ways to maintain structure and a lot more control, potentially even more dynamic, if everything is maintained with the right structure and the right proportions of that structure, let's say, right? For example, if I'm going to play a big octave here, and I can use some wrist throw, I can use finger extension, I can the bridge here is still supporting it. Because of all that, it's incredibly easy. It's incredibly easy to play forte or fortissimo like that. So that was a little bit of a digression, but really great point. You know what? I wanted to make one more point, Quentin, about your octaves in this piece. Through that area, we talked about the articulation and the release. What I didn't mention is, can the wrist be more fluid on the release to start with? Can we feel that come up? And also, when we play the octave, can the wrist be a cushion for us? When the wrist doesn't function like a cushion, like these octaves I just showed, where the wrist is high and we just play down, we get a very bright tone. Maybe there are occasions in huge sonatas and concerti where we need that, but not in a really beautiful lyrical piece, right? So if we're playing and we've released well, when we play the next octave, can the wrist be engaged and have enough structure, not locked? Locked structure that's not what I mean, but we have enough control and support that the wrist functions like a cushion. So in each one of these that you play, can you wiggle the wrist after each attack? Even this one? Because if we can do that, then we're training ourselves to feel, this is how much structure I need in the wrist. And when I release some of it, I can get this cushion as we play, which once again helps our tone be much more warm instead of that really pointed where we just play kind of from the wrist down and throw the fingers in. Whew, okay. Oh, I had one more thing, Quentin, and then we'll wrap this up. By the way, Rhodesy, hello. You mentioned, Rhodesy, you must have joined right after we talked about the tempo stuff with this piece, because yes, your comment is, isn't this a tempo controversy? Yes. Quentin, so since you showed us the very end, the last few bars here, it's almost a literal repeat of the beginning. Except we get this, which is really nice. Really try to hear the dissonance that's created by this G sharp being held, especially with the fingers. The pedal releases over here, and then we get this chord. So we have a beautiful E major, and then we get, but we still have G sharp. And we should still be hearing the G sharp sound that resolves. And we do it again, right? So if we play and we can sink into that G sharp just enough, when we lift the pedal, we hear that extreme dissonance that resolves. Maybe the saddest, truly saddest moments in the piece are in these two bars where we get this almost like a suspension and resolution. So be sure and listen for that. Make sure we're holding on with 5 so that when we take our pedal, 5, that G sharp is still sounding against that other chord. And we can hear the resolution slowly happen as we move toward the end of the bar. Yeah? Quentin, I think that wraps up my comments for you. I hope that was helpful. And we would absolutely, we would love to hear you play the middle part. So as you work on that, please send it in. Let's give Quentin some more applause in the chat if we could. Jack, you said, what do I think of the Chopin fugue? You know, I would have to look it up to even get a reminder of what the Chopin fugue sounds like. So I can't tell you off the top of my head. You know, and just a quick side note, and then we're going to jump. I see AnatoPhysio is here. Welcome. We're going to get to your playing next. But just a quick side note, because I think it's interesting. You know, YouTube is a great place to learn, and it's a great place to share. I sit and have time like this, and it's awesome. And I love getting to spend the time with everybody. And I think some of us that we put ourselves out there as experts in a field. So like Dennis Zhdanov and Josh Wright and so on and so on. Even some of the people in tone bass, I would group with what I'm about to say. There are extremely few people, even master teachers that I've had, that have like all of the rep in their mind with the snap of a finger. And I mean, I wish I had that. Yeah, Sir Wolseley, let us said which opus and which number about the fugue. That would be great. Yeah, Yuja is one of those, Sir Wolseley. Yuja is one. Martha Argerich is probably one. Vladimir Feltzman, who I talk about, who is one of my mentors, he was one. Anything that I brought into play for him in a master class or in a private lesson, he didn't need any music. He would just sit down and start playing. Middle of the piece, the phrase he wanted me to work on, no practice, and it would be flawless. I haven't met another person in my life that could do that other than him. Even all of the other really wonderful teachers that I had, there weren't any other people. So, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to say we're all human, except for those that aren't, like Yuja. So I do my best. All right. Great. Well, I'm glad. Quentin, thanks everybody for putting the applause in the chat. Really, really nice work, Quentin. We'd love to hear you play again. So please, anything that you're working on, send it in, and we would love to hear from you again. Okay, second up today, I'm really excited about this because I don't often get to teach my own arrangements on the channel, but I think that's really cool. AnatoPhysio has been working on my arrangement of Schindler's List. He says, I'm ready to be roasted. So I'm going to pull that up and we're going to take a listen to that. Yeah, I'm so excited. So just a quick backstory about the arrangement. John Williams, like a year, maybe it's 2 years ago now, he pulled the rights from arrangers to publish sheet music, arrangements of his music in sheet music. And so there are a number of people who purchased copies of this piece while it was still available. And unfortunately, I'm going to be showing the sheet music today, so I guess, this is a teaching opportunity. I legally can get away with it. Yeah, the sheet music is unfortunately no longer available until John Williams changes his mind and lets us all publish our work again. So, John Williams, if you're listening, please give us that back. All right. Let me pull up Anado's recording, and we're going to take a listen. All right, here we go. Nice work, Anado. Let's give Anado a round of applause in the chat. Oh, good stuff. I shouldn't be smiling. It's such a sad piece of music. But it's really nice to hear someone play the notes that I wrote. So that's really cool. And if Anado, I know Anado might have to step in and out because I think they're in the middle of working. So they said they were going to try to check in today. So if you're still here, answer Rhodes's question about setting up the camera like that. Oh, sweet. You say you should be able to stay. Awesome. So if you can answer Rhodes's question about setting up a camera, that would be cool. But you also don't want to miss anything that I'm about to say. So, all right, there's so much good stuff that's happening on Anado. So really great. A lot of nice, since we were just talking about structure, good structure in the hand most of the time. Pretty good freedom of motion. Nice sense of phrase in various places. I'm going to jump to, because you had a particular question for me, I want to answer that first before I go on some long spiels about other things. So I'm going to answer your question first, and it was about nearer the end of the piece. We have, starting after the double bar line, so measure 34, there are some big moments in the left hand, right? And you were particularly asking about how to navigate what's going on in the left hand. So one big thing, and you can see it written down on the page. One big thing is right now you're creating 3 separate hand positions, and you're trying to bounce through 3 of them. And what you're doing is you're taking 1, 3, 5, I think, for each chord, like this. Maybe 1, 2, 5 for the top one. That gives us, in a sense, there are 3 points that we need to perfectly nail at a really fast tempo. That's quite difficult. So instead, if we can group things together slightly differently, so we only have to make 1 leap forward or 1 leap up the keyboard. So let's talk a little bit about that. Just looking at this very first one, the first 2 chords here, those simply make up a triad plus the octave on top. It's just our A minor triad plus the octave in the next one. So these can both be played in a single hand position using 5, 3, 2, and again 3, 2, 1. So the 3 and the 2 remain on the same pitches. So now, this is just a bounce, which is way quicker than trying to play and move the whole hand between those. So just a bounce. Now we're left with the last one being the difficult one, but now we've eliminated one of the 3, so we've made it 33% easier, right? So for this last one, we might think about using 5, 2, 1 there. I'm not going to be able to go through fingering choices for every bar here, but this is the idea. Create a group of 2 at the beginning, especially where the first note and the last note share an octave. So that happens again here. That is played without shifting the hand. So in the second one, we slightly move toward the thumb, and we can play it very quickly. And then we have to throw / leap to the uppermost. So. Right? Next chord in F. Notice, even on this last one that's pictured here, this is all, and this shows you what I was actually thinking when I wrote it. This is all in one hand position. Have to, because that note in the right hand is too low. It's not supposed to be played by left, but we can't continue to make the left hand ascend. So, easy, we just keep the left hand in one place, playing the same rhythm that we've just established early in the bar, right? So all of these with a nice bounce. So another great way that you could practice this is take that grouping and practice that as one group, bouncing between those. So notice there's a pause for the low octave, and then we can play the last. And you can eventually work into feeling all of those as one ascending motion, kind of ascending from 2 to 1 to 1. 2, 1, 1. I'll show you from the top down also. So if I just play the top 2, 1, 1 and release. So the uppermost finger is leading the hand up. Okay. Another thing that I wrote in these bars that you may have seen, I had written in memory, and that wasn't because, yeah, there were a couple little memory things going on, but what I actually meant by that was think about the harmony that's present in the left hand for each half note. So at the beginning of this, we play a low A, and then the other chords that we bounce through are also A minor. It's just A minor, really, in inversions. Now, second half of the bar, we play an A again, but we're actually in F. So do we know our inversions really well? Can we think about them as this is just one chord and I'm playing through the inversions of them? Same thing goes when we get further down on the page. So I'm looking at bar 35 now. And even in performance, this is something that I think. My melody is well enough practiced. I'm phrasing it by itself, kind of. But I think D, G, C. And usually I don't need to think about any of that theory stuff for the last part of the bar. But to remember the harmony changes and the chords that I'm in the middle of, I think about those lowest octaves and what they're going to be. Those are my landmarks. So A, and then D, G, F, E, C, and then B that's cut off. Yeah? Okay, so that, for me especially, that helps me to remember in a performance when there's a lot going on and I need those, just a couple landmarks to help remember what I'm doing, especially when it's at full tempo. Yeah? Okay. Oh, thanks, Quentin, for being here. Awesome. Jack, I see you said it's 4:55 a.m. for you. Wow. Oh, thanks so much for being here early in the morning. And thanks, Playing Piano, for that compliment. All right. Let's go back. Let's talk about some more stuff, Anado. Okay. We're going to work through from the top of the piece down. And let's see. I'll try to go through the small stuff quickly so we can get to the bigger stuff and spend a little more time on it. All right, here we go. From the beginning, some of the notes you can see that I have in blue. First thing is at the end of measure 4, we had a wrong note there. Maybe it doesn't happen all the time. But this lowest pitch should be an A. You may have played a B or a C, but it should be an A. Okay, getting into measure 6. You do a great job already, Quentin. Sorry, not Quentin. Anado. You do a great job of moving the wrist through the rolled chords. There are a lot of places that I didn't mark rolled chords in the piece, but if you listen to my recording, I play them anyway. It's a stylistic choice. You can choose to you do it or not. It's up to you. And if we can't reach that 10th, then absolutely roll it. So you're already doing great wrist movement and keeping alignment from 5 all the way up to 1. The thing we need to watch out for is that in this really intimate moment, we don't play a really loud rolled chord. So keep all of that movement going because it's great, but just make sure that we roll more softly. And we can take time if you'd like to. So it doesn't have to be a super fast roll. Yeah, so I play a lot of rolls in there. None of them are marked on the score. It's just, it makes it really easy to control if I do that, and I like the way it sounds. You can do that too. Just be sure that as we roll, we stay nice and quiet and under the dynamic level of the melody, right? A couple other things I want to point out here on this page. You can choose to bring them out if you'd like to. There are 2 counter melodies, well, maybe almost 3 really. I'll highlight them in yellow for us. There's one. Here's one. And it changes hands. And let's see. And really this kind of goes up. So. Right? So let me play each of those yellow counter melodies one at a time for you. So here's the first one in measure 7. So that's an opportunity while the melody is just holding on a half note. There's an opportunity to create a little bit of interest there. Next one, end of measure 8, going into measure 9. Yes. So that's another opportunity. That one is probably the hardest one on the page because we have a melody happening at the same time and we have to weave these 2 textures together where the counter melody doesn't obscure the main melody. But it's an opportunity for another beautiful moment. Third one up in measure 11. Once again, another opportunity. Right? Okay. And there's nothing wrong with rolling Anado. There's nothing wrong with that. It can be beautiful. All right. Okay, so here's something we're going to spend a little bit more time on. At the bottom of the first page, we have this run that leads us to the second statement of the theme. I noticed that you have, we might be doing a little bit excessive movement in the right hand up the scale. So, for example, the cross of the thumb under third finger, there's a lot of wrist movement. Probably, I couldn't see it, but probably a lot of elbow movement to throw the wrist out that far. And then it kind of comes back. When we get near the top of the scale, there's also a lot of tension in the fifth finger. And then it somewhat relaxes, and we do it again. The combination of those two things, this really too much movement, lateral movement, and the tension in 5, it's not contained to a small point in time, let's say. So it tends to be there at the beginning of the scale, and we see it if I show you from the top down, so it looks similar on the video. 5 tends to be kind of either out like this, or sometimes it's kind of curled in like this and holding out there. Out is, well, first of all, no tension. 5 is just kind of hanging out, and it can do whatever it wants. A little bit of tension is 5 sticking straight out. A lot of tension is 5 sticking out and curled. So, and if 5 is doing that, it's really going to prohibit 1, 2, 3. The fingers far away, it's going to prohibit them from doing the job as easily as they can. So what we'd really like to see is up the scale, just a little wrist movement. Not that. Notice the difference between that. That's a lot of movement. That's a little movement. Right? So, you can see as I go more quickly, I'm trying to watch the playback of myself instead of looking at my hands while I play it, so I can talk to you about what's going on here. But there are little back and forth movements like this, right? That's great. But there aren't any really big ones. And simply the speed we need to attain doesn't allow for a really big wrist movement like that and a couple of them to happen. So a couple things, you can think about those and try them out slowly in practice. Once again, this is purely a D minor harmonic, harmonic minor scale. That's all it is. Practice your D harmonic minor scale separately, and that will start to become more and more natural for you. You added a note in the left hand at the beginning of this bar, by the way. So the left hand here only has 1, 3, 5. The right hand has 1, 3, 5 are the fingers and the notes in the scale. 1, 3, 5. Right hand has the E. Then it shifts. Yes? Okay. Great. Next page. Okay, just a general comment. The next page we get into this, the second statement of this theme. Whatever you do, and this is applicable to all music that has a busy accompaniment and a not so busy melody. I get the melody here is still in octaves, but the focus always needs to be on phrase and the phrase of the octaves. So, once again, when I perform this, the right hand is completely memorized. It's so well practiced, the notes, the jumps, and the phrasing, that I almost don't have to think about it. So all of that should be very natural because I actually don't have time. You probably don't either. We don't have time to look down at everything the left hand has to do. So throughout all of that, my eyes are almost exclusively watching left hand because we need to. That's where a great deal of the movement is. Once in a while, I get to glance at my thumb in the right hand to find one of the octaves. But that's about it. So, all that said, we need to have the phrasing. And you said you didn't play all the notes in the right hand, just the melody. That's okay. You can add those others in as you can. So the octaves and the leaps, those are the most important things to get, right? Practice the right hand by itself. And so there's the first bar. Let me do it one more time. Okay, and then give yourself a test. Can you play it with your eyes closed? It's not easy because they're all leaps. Let's see. So if I close my eyes. I wasn't as fluid as I would like it to be, but we should be able to feel that and not have to watch it, right? And while we're feeling that, the shift in position, can the physical movement be as fluid and seamless as you would like the melody to sound? So if I play the melody with two hands, if we want that to be the phrase, we don't want to let the hand stop and hover. Let me show you from the top down also. So this is more free. Yes? But stopping and hovering would look something like this. Notice how instantly we lose line and phrase and direction, right? So we want to have that really programmed well. So well enough practiced that we maintain all of that in just one, or we maintain motion, let's say, right? If you can do it with the right hand alone, that's great. And then we try to do it with both hands together. Okay, that wraps up second page. Jack, that's an interesting comment. You say whenever you hear it, this piece, it cheers you up. That's interesting. But, music moves us in a lot of different ways. Let's see. I'm going to wrap this up and maybe hopefully just a couple more things. All right, Anado. Let's move on to the next page. The trills at the top of the page. I think I must admit that for some reason, maybe between the time that I wrote this, that I wrote the notation, and the time that I recorded it, I think I changed what I played. And so you can make this change also. The very first trill, let's put it in red. The very first trill that's marked, I tried to clarify the notes of the trill by writing that E next to it. And you've done a great job of modeling that first one after all of the subsequent ones. Unfortunately, it should probably be written the way I wrote this bar down lower. The trill actually starts on D. So, if you want it to perfectly match the recording, the trill will start on D and B, go between D and E. Same as it would down on the lower on the page. So, when we're in, whatever bar is this, 23. Yeah. So if that's not a huge shift to make for you, feel free to trill between D and E, not E and F. Although E and F doesn't sound bad, it just doesn't actually match what I recorded. I should probably change that. Everything else, all your other trills they're looking and sounding pretty good. And you're doing a great thing. Don't even bother trying to trill through. For example, it's totally fine and will be almost inaudible if you stop the trill for that brief moment when the octave in the right hand gets played, which you're already doing. That's fine. And that's you'll see passages like this in some of the Liszt etudes where there are trills while other things play. A ton of people take that the same way. While the other note happens, the octave or the chord around the trill. Jack, I don't know how to do trills with your nose. So even in Liszt, there are a lot of pianists that stop the trill for that brief moment because the trill ends up being masked anyway by the chord or the octave that's being played at the same time. Gives us that brief moment to like reset, relax, make sure we can keep trilling as evenly and as nicely as possible, right? Okay. I think 3 more things. One of them is going to be very fast. 2 might take a little bit more time. But here we go. Down lower on this same page, we have my favorite section of all. So this chord I've circled here in blue, that I'll circle in red. Watch your notes on that one. It's not the same as the chord in 27. It's 1 note different. Okay, throughout all these, it's only 4 measures, but there's a ton of notes from 26 through 28 or 29 on the next page. Think about practicing these in 2 distinct ways. One with a lot of finger attack and not worrying about the dynamic. And if you can, be really particular about the actual rhythms that I wrote. So when there are 8, and 6, and then 10, 8, 7, 8, 6, 7, sorry, 8 there. If you can be really particular about getting those rhythms spot on when we go slow and we emphasize fingers. Spend some time practicing like that. Then on the flip side, try to minimize your finger movement and play almost all of this just with little movements of the wrist. I'll show you from the top also. So all of this, there's a lot of wrist movement to carry the hand back and forth. And the fingers are doing actually relatively little. If I didn't move the wrists at all, I'd barely be playing with the fingers themselves. All right. I think those 2 things sum up some great ways to practice the really fast passage work in these bars. And keep it nice and soft. Yes? Last thing. Feel free to... I wrote accents over all kinds of notes in the right hand here. Feel free to really sting those. So... And notice as I'm going through it this time, when that sting happens, that little accent, there's also a brief moment of time and that brief moment of time still exists even when we speed up further. So it gets evened out by our practice of nice and crisp articulation of the fingers, right? And then we balance that with movement of the wrist. All comes together, putting that sting in there and then continuing to do a little bit of both of those other things. So to relate this to some other things for other people that are here, there are a lot of passages where we can benefit from practicing somewhat in opposite ways. And that's what we just described here. 2 of the opposites are exclusively fingers, and then almost exclusively wrist motion. We incorporate the 2. Once we have felt what that's like to play, we can incorporate the 2, and we get the best of both worlds. Whereas it can be extremely difficult to just think, oh, I want to play with both of those without feeling it, without feeling a lot of focus in each of those areas. Practicing in opposites, we can apply that in a ton of different ways. Tons and tons and tons. You can look in your music that you're working on on your own and probably find a massive number of ways to practice in opposite ways, not just related to articulation. Okay. Two little things about the next page. So here we are ending this quick section of notes. When we get to 29, that little bit at the end of that measure, the left hand takes some of those notes to help the right hand be able to move. Let's go back here. So in order to make this transition even more fluid, and you can apply this also to a couple other places in this arrangement, where the right hand has to be to play this, it has to be up here in the keys, right? The position of the right hand. After we play the G sharp with thumb, the right hand can start to move. The left hand can come in, take its place here. So. Let me do it once more. So right hand starts to move toward the outside of the key. Left hand can take its place over top. Instead of right hand sticking here and then left hand trying to push it out of the way and running into it, and then we can't get our fingers where they need to be. So the right hand can slide out of the way, make room for the left hand. Hope that makes sense. Okay, lower on the page here, this is another very common compositional tool of list. What's going on the right hand? And it's a little bit more difficult because we have to change direction on the same pitch. Marginally more difficult because of that. But we could also think about it that being given the same pitch to change direction on can also make it easier if we approach it the right way. So when we are ascending, now that I've shown you the music, let's come back here. When we ascend, we can practice releasing as one motion the top, and then we're going to fall into the downward motion. So release, fall, release, fall. Notice how the hand is coming up and then dropping in. And the faster you go, the more minimal that motion will be, but it'll still exist. That little bit of release helps to re-articulate 5, and it helps to re-engage us in the reverse direction. And it actually makes this it a lot easier to play. And it'll make any other passage that you have that's similar to this a lot easier to play if you think about it like that. That we're in addition to changing direction to being down the piano, we're also introducing a little bit of vertical movement to re-engage the mechanism. Because if all we do is stay linear and we try to go back and forth, we're going to have to play 5 twice with only finger. That's very difficult. And that can introduce actually a lot of tension because we're trying to articulate reverse direction so quickly and then play again. But if instead we feel the double note at the top, basically played by the finger on the way out and played by the wrist on the way in, the way down. So played by finger and then by wrist. Now we have 2 different motions we're giving to the same pitch, instead of trying to repeat the same motion twice at a kind of an extreme speed. Okay, the last very tiny thing, Anado. Very tiny. There are places on the last page where you can feel free to take things with, share them between the hands. So looking in measure 43, leading us out, you could play the beginning of this, left hand, top with right hand if you want. Now we're locked in 44, 45. So once again, I've marked here. Let's see. Yeah. So in 45, as I've already marked in blue, the right hand can take the first group of 5. Left hand can take the second group of 5. Right hand comes across the top and plays the first note of 46. Then that becomes, you can articulate that however you want, and it's a lot easier to control than simply playing a scale, right, with one hand. That'll take a lot of practice to play that scale accurately the way you'd like. But if you split between the two hands, super easy. Okay, I think that's going to wrap this up. Thanks, Anado. This was a lot of fun to talk about. I'm glad you're enjoying playing the piece. And thanks for sending this recording in. Can we give another round of applause to Anado? I hope it helped. I didn't have a chance. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. Jack, I have not watched that Holocaust movie. No. Yeah, Seth says great job. Great job, Anado. And Rhodesy, yes, Rhodesy, speaking of, composition and things that we talk about a lot, yeah, this is a difficult arrangement. It's a difficult arrangement, but it's not as difficult as it actually looks on paper. And if you study Liszt, you would say the same thing. A lot of Liszt looks so scary on paper. And you start to play it and you say, this is really pianistic. It fits in the hand. Like everything that happens feels natural when we get it the right way. I'm not saying Liszt is easy, but perhaps we could say that technically Liszt is easier than Brahms, for example. Brahms, which usually does not feel as natural in the hands. Not as many notes, but very different. Whew. All right. Wonderful. We have another segment to get through. Antonio, are you still here? I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee. Ugh. Usually when I program Schindler's List on a program, on a concert program this arrangement of it, because of all the finger work and everything else, it's usually I play it toward the end of the first half of the program because I like to be really nicely warmed up. Yeah, I think there was one show, actually, probably the first time I played it publicly, I put it second on the program. That was not a good idea. It was a lot harder to play after only one piece on stage than after like 6 or 7. Antonio, brilliant. I see that you're still here. Okay. We're going to hear Antonio playing some of Misty, very famous piece. Antonio's working on a little bit of improv and comping, so that's going to be the main thing that we talk about. And I don't have any sheet music for that one. Let me cue up Antonio's video, and we will take a listen. By the way, if you haven't already, please give the video a thumbs up, if you could, if you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, please don't give it a thumbs down. Just you can do whatever you want, right? All right. Here is Antonio playing a bit of Misty. All right. Antonio, nice work. Let's drop some applause for Antonio. Dith, hello. You've missed a fun time today, Dith. Okay. Antonio, nice work. And nice improv, knowing it all by memory. We've got those chord changes down and having the melody memorized. Great stuff. So you had sent me a particular question about comping with the left hand. So you're looking for some ideas and maybe a little bit how to make it easier, more effective, especially about keeping time with the right hand, right? So we're in C here. First up, if you know the chord changes, you know them really well. Can we comp? Can we just play the changes without the melody involved? And can we play them really rhythmically? I would even go so far as saying, instead of playing 3 notes, let me see, I have to figure out what the changes are. G, and then F. Okay, so let's take those. So maybe just take your bottom note and your top 2, because we're playing everything in the same voicing. They're 3-note voicings pretty much all the time. Root, and then 5 and 7. So let's just play root, 5, 7, next chord change. So this really would kind of happen twice. C7, F7, yeah. And then F minor 7. Okay, so I've taken all of those changes, root, followed by the top 2, and keeping that rhythmic. Also, it was for me mainly to keep my place, but if you can sing, hum the tune, if you know the words, that would be even better. I don't know the words that well. Can you hum it while you play the left hand only? And then we can make sure left hand stays nice and locked in, and we don't have to worry about finding the melody notes with the other hand, right? I'd say once you've done this kind of, we're creating a block out of the left hand, root, and then the rest of the chord. Root, rest of the chord, no matter where the changes go. Then go back and try to play each of these separately. Because not all of our chord changes take the same amount of time. So that's going to make that more difficult, because it doesn't seem like we're adding much, but we're taking up time with another action. So in a sense, instead of just having 1, 2, or maybe not on that chord change, but here, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now we have 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've taken 2, 4 and made it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've made 4 actions into 6 actions, if you will. So if we can simplify that down first and lock in some comping on our main beats to get us started. There are a lot of other rhythmic exercises you could do, Antonio, if you want to practice jazz rhythms. Gosh, I would suggest getting a few books. There are 2 books by Mark Levine that are really great. I can't think of the names of one of them. I think is just called The Jazz Book. And then he has another one that's, I think he got some feedback that it was a little advanced. He wrote it as a beginner book, but the first 10 pages like blaze through a ton of material. And then on page 11, you're given a lead sheet and told to read it. So he wrote another book subsequently that breaks the beginning stages down even more. You can email me and I can look up the name of that book for you because I've got both copies, both of those books. But they also have comping rhythms that you can practice. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So doing some syncopated rhythms like that, where we learn, usually the pianist plays one of a handful of comping patterns. Whether you're playing in a jazz group or you're playing solo, you're going to learn some patterns that are very comfortable for you, and those are our starting points. The more advanced we get, the more we can start to combine patterns on the fly and do things like that. There's another one. So it's still focused on syncopated rhythms. And I'm still using just your basic 3-note voicing that you've started practicing in the left hand already. We're just introducing other rhythmic components. We started, just as a reminder, with 1 and 3, 1 and 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. Those are the beats, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, if you want, okay, so you say now playing the chord and comping with the thumb. Something like that. 1, 2. If it's simply a coordination thing, I would start by keeping it very straight. So still play root, top, but now we're playing 1, 2, thumb, thumb, 1, 2. Some of these we don't get another opportunity, but when we do, 2, thumb, thumb. Play the thumb twice, and let's keep it really predictable and as easy as possible to execute. Still working just on the left hand. So there's an example for you. Jess, those might be the book names, the jazz theory book and the jazz piano book. I wonder about the theory book. I don't know if that's the name of the earlier, more beginner one. But the jazz piano book for sure, that sounds very familiar. Okay, Antonio, does that sound good? You could also, if you really want to just practice thumb work, look up some of these other comping rhythms. Yeah. And you can throw those rhythms in. Antonio, do you have a notation program? Or if you don't, you can go on MuseScore. This might be a really great thing. And then sometimes it's more helpful to hear what needs to happen, especially talking about rhythm and feeling it like that. If we can hear how it happens rather than try to read it off a page, especially for jazz. So if you do get a comping book or a book that has comping examples, instead of tearing your hair out and saying, oh my gosh, this is so difficult to read these 16s and dotted rhythms, go to a program like MuseScore and just input on a single pitch, just on C, the rhythms that are given on the page and click playback. And that will give you so much information, and then you can model your playing on the playback that you're hearing, the rhythmic playing. Yeah. So, yes, Antonio, I get that. It's hard to maintain the rhythm once you start playing the right. That is because the patterns, the comping patterns, haven't been ingrained enough in us, in our mind and in our ear and in our hand. So as soon as we introduce something else to think about, like playing the right hand, playing the melody, well, the left hand goes out the window, right? Because if the left hand is taking focus in order to execute, we can't shift that focus anywhere else. So what we need to do is get, like I've been saying kind of in the past few videos on the channel here, we need to put that on autopilot. We need to work hard enough at just that component that our ear knows exactly the pattern that we want to play, so it hears it. And then we've practiced it enough with the hand that we can... This might be difficult, but it's a good example of having something on autopilot. So let's see. I'm going to take this pattern. Once I figured out in my mind what the pattern was that I wanted to play, and I said, okay, I experienced it once. Let's say I can talk to you and maintain the comping pattern and not break the rhythm. And I could maybe even answer a question right now, but it would be very difficult to answer a question and extend thinking power even further. But the point is, I can still produce language and gesture with my other hand because there's almost no part of the mind thinking about what the left hand is doing anymore. That's the point that we want to get to. And we're going to do that one rhythmic example at a time. So that's why if we start just with quarters or just with half notes, that is totally fine. And can you have a conversation with someone while you continue your left hand pattern? Probably speaking is going to be a little easier than adding the right hand back in. Yeah, for sure. I don't know the notes that well. That is, for me, that's more difficult to play that right hand because I have to really think about what the melody is while the left hand is put on autopilot. Yep. So I know those aren't quick fixes, Antonio. I'm not sure that there is going to be a quick fix for comping and for feeling that rhythm. And I brought up MuseScore, for example, in the playback feature because some of my private students that have been the most successful at learning jazz rhythms, especially if their note reading isn't really awesome, they do a great job just listening and taking it in that way and then modeling what they hear at the piano. When you do start to add right hand back in, do what I just did. We're going back to our very simple pattern. And I'm only playing the melody note in the right hand. Yeah. Oh dear. There it is. Okay. I think those are my tips for you, Antonio. One other thing, that little, you did kind of a run at the very end, and you used C, and you did some notes up to the top. This is a C major 7. You know your C major 7 chord, right? Typically, if we add upper extensions to a major 7, 9 sounds really good. C major 7, 9 would be D. But when we add 11, which would be F, F natural does not sound great with a major 7. So let's say flat 11 or natural 11 does not sound great. But sharp 11 does. That would be F sharp in a C major 7 chord. Sharp 11 sounds nice. Okay, great. Antonio, let me know if you have any follow-up questions about that. Cool. Let's give Antonio another round of applause because, you know, playing improv and playing with that music, and this is playing all by feel. We talk a lot about the classical style on the channel here, but that's a hugely important thing is to understand feel, and it's a very different topic and concept than when we play music off a page and similar things. We still want to incorporate that at the highest levels. We still want to incorporate playing with feeling in classical music, obviously. But usually that's one of the later things visited because we have to learn all the notes on the page first. Whereas when we're playing jazz and improving, we're going to do a lot by feel much earlier in the process. Let's see. Faze says, practice the jazz stride with rootless voicings. So Faze, I take it that's what you're working on. I don't study enough jazz to be able to, I couldn't tell you what rootless voicings are. Not in stride style. I could tell you what a rootless voicing is, but not in, I don't know how I would put that in stride. Because I always think of stride as root. You know? Something like that. All right. So Sir Wolseley has a question. I'd say I wasn't actually expecting to get to any questions, but I think we can open it up to some questions from people. So yeah, Faze says I was doing it, but I don't know. I would still call that a voicing with a root because the lower part has the root. I don't know. Okay, we got 2 questions about Chopin nocturnes. Great. Let's cover those 2. I do have, I think, some edition of the nocturnes on here. It's not a wonderful edition, but it'll get the job done. So we're going to go to Sir Wolseley's question first, because I know Sir Wolseley is working on Chopin's Opus 27, number 1. So we're talking about the Piumoso section. Left hand. Let's see. So do you give the triplet feeling at tempo, or at tempo it won't matter? Oh, okay. So we're thinking about, does the beginning of Piumoso are we thinking about the left hand in 3 when we actually perform it, or are we thinking about it some other way? Yes, absolutely needs to be in 3 in a triplet feel. Even though it is still, we're going to build into that faster tempo, because we need to know exactly where the right hand is not lining up, because they're just eighths. So 1, oh, triplet, 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 triplet. So yes, think about the triplet feel from beat 1 of the Piumoso. Don't think 1 and 2 and 3. When you need to flip it around, when the tempo gets faster, and we really need to feel it in triplets, the coordination between the 2 hands is going to be a little wacko, because you have felt the right hand coordinated with a duple in the left instead of a triplet. Because of the type of writing it is, there's not going to be an emphasis on 1, 2, and 3. So we're not going to hear. Let's put it this way: a finished interpretation isn't going to sound like triplets, because we're not going to really show. We're not going to really show that this is 1, 2, 3, and then an accent on 2, 2, 3, and an accent on 3, 2, 3, etc. Everything's going to be on one dynamic plane that's very soft. So in that sense, the writing is it's more about creating texture than anything else. But when we're learning it, we need to feel it in triplets. And then when we get here, it's going to pay off. Yes. Whew. Okay. Yeah, great question, Sir Wolseley. Really stick with hearing triplets, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, and feel how the right hand, when it's only in eighths, comes in between those left hand beats. That's really important at the beginning stages of learning the piece. And the more we experience it and the more we practice it and the more we play it, the less we're going to think about triplets and the more we're just going to think about painting a texture with one hand, playing the melody with the other hand. Yeah. Cool. Let's jump over to Seth's question. Oh, and Sir Worsley, I hope playing is going well. We'd love to hear it someday on one of these streams. That would be great. Seth's question, do you have tips for playing, let's see, something in Chopin's Opus 9, number 2? Let's jump over to Opus 9, number 2. Okay. So tips for playing the chord on beat 6. I'm thinking, Seth, you're just talking about bar 1. So that one. Second bar, let's see. So this. So second bar. Yeah, if that's the one that you mean, I would typically, if you have this reach, the beginning of the bar, we play 5-2, 4-2-1. Next 3 beats, 5-2, 3-2-1. And since I'm doing this from overhead view, when I lean away from the mic and actually where I had positioned myself to play, look at the change in alignment of the wrist and the hand. So let me show you one more time. Let's see. So the thumb still needs to turn toward B flat, yes, but it's a lot easier than if we haven't leaned this way to the right, and if we're stuck kind of playing in our usual spot, which is over this way, then, and we don't lean, this is super uncomfortable, and I'm way up all the way against the fall board. Just leaning makes a huge difference. So those are the fingers I would use if you've got that reach, because it'll keep it really connected and make sure that we lean toward where the left hand is going. Yes, and don't stay planted. We can always reach outside the body, right? So where our torso is, it's always easy to reach to the outside, up with the right, down with the left. It's never easy to reach across the body, right? And as soon as we start to cross the torso, we lose all of the alignment from the fingers through the knuckles, the bridge, the wrist, and the arm. So we want to do whatever we possibly can to keep that alignment, because that alignment is what makes this feel very easy to play. When it's not aligned, it feels super awkward. And like I'm elbowing myself almost in the stomach if I haven't shifted, because of this is not natural, right? When it's sticking in the middle of me. But if I just lean, the elbow never crosses the plane of the torso. The right hand is up high enough. we don't run into a similar problem with the right hand crossing in the opposite direction, right? I hope that will help you, Seth. Good question. Are you leaning back too? Yes. Yeah, I would have normally thought about that as simply a musical gesture, but it's not. It's also a part of allowing more space for the arm to come in front. It's a good catch, because I wouldn't have even consciously registered that as a technical thing, but it is. Nice. Cool. Seth, I hope that answers your question. If you have any question follow-ups, let me know. I'm going to jump over to Nathaniel's question. Sir Woolsey is saying the 3 triplets is giving you head shakes. Headaches. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, if you learn it now, though, there'll be so much other music that'll be easy to play. Nathaniel says, when learning a piece, first play it fully at half speed and gradually speed it up, or try to speed segments up before joining segments. Great question, Nathaniel. When we're first learning a piece, okay, let me break this into a couple categories. If we're learning something that's, say, relatively short, and Nathaniel, can you let me know, like, what are you talking about, a particular piece? What level are you playing? What sort of rep are you playing? Because I can answer your question a little bit better, but I'll generally answer now. The answers depend a little bit on how advanced we are. So when, okay, great, thanks. All right, Nathaniel. So when we're learning a piece, I like to learn things, and I'd always recommend learning things in short segments. Pretty much the only time that I will read an entire piece through when I haven't played it before is probably the very, very first day working on it. And it'll be slow. I won't be trying to sight read it at tempo. I'll just be trying to kind of experience all of the notes so I get a feel of what's happening where. I might also coordinate that with listening to a recording if one's available. So, of course, Bach, there's plenty of recordings available. Follow along with the score. And that's ear training, right? Ear training is, in a sense, half the battle of playing something. If our ear knows what it's supposed to be, it can guide us in a much better way than if it is not aware. Okay, so after that first read through, I won't touch playing the entire piece again pretty much until things are very close to being performance tempo in their little segments. So, Nathaniel, how much time do you spend practicing? Because the answer might be affected by that too. I'm coming from a place I have, let's call it endurance on the bench. I know what it's like to sit here and play for 2 hours at a time, or 4 hours at a time. I know what it's like to play a performance. And that doesn't bother me. I don't lose focus. Muscle groups don't get tired. That's all working correctly because I've experienced that for a long time. If we're doing a lot of practice, a lot of time on the bench, and that kind of endurance capability, we don't have that yet. I might argue for playing through a piece in its entirety more often, because we're going to learn a lot from doing that. But if we have nice endurance built, where it's just simply being here and going through the motions is not difficult, and we can really stay focused, at least as long as mentally possible, at a time, we can stay focused on the task at hand. The more capable of that we are, the less time we're going to spend running through the whole thing, because we don't need practice building endurance. We need practice doing all of the very specific components, whether that's learning notes, rhythms, working on interpretation, working on joining phrases, etc. So, to answer your question, Bach, I might learn in 4 to 8 bar segments, and I am going to learn it very well, so near to performance tempo, before I move on to the next segment. So I might spend, 15 minutes on the first 8 bars. They might not get to where I need them to be in just 15 minutes, but I'm going to spend 15 minutes under tempo, maybe another 15 minutes on the next 8 bars in one day. Then come back to the first 8 for another 15. Then go to the second 8 for another 15. Now we've done an hour on 16 measures, all under tempo, but I lost all my comments. Hold on. There it goes. So now we've done an hour on just 16 measures, going slowly under tempo. That's probably a fairly small amount of music, right? Second day comes around, second day of practice. Don't go to measure 17 and play 17 to 24. Let's review 1 through 8, 9 through 16. We'll continue to review those. And until we can come back on a new day and have it be, let's say, like 90% of where we left it the previous day, at least 90% of where we left it the previous day, don't move on to the next segment. I've had a number of in-person students that are kind of, say, I saw the word guilty used by a Bedlington groomer, guilty of trying to tackle too much rep too quickly, too much in one piece of rep. And not enough time gets spent on the little details. Then when you do day 1 and you say, we learned 64 bars, or we played through 64 bars, you come back day 2 and none of those 64 bars are very good. They're all just kind of, there might not even be any recollection of how to play some of it. Seth and Dith, you're we can fix that, absolutely fix that, just by having the discipline to stick with a much shorter segment. We can do all kinds of things to keep it interesting. The one that I mentioned was just splitting up, only doing 15 minutes on 8, 15 minutes on 8. If you're really focused on like correct fingering, correct notes, working on articulation and dynamics, getting it all put together, man, those 15 minutes are going to fly by working on those 8 bars. You should probably even feel like it's not enough time. And, we have a timer on, timer goes off, okay, stop, put it on the back burner, let it simmer. The mind, the subconscious continues to work on that stuff. When we've told it it's important. This exactly makes me think of a lesson I just taught. When our brain doesn't know how to interpret what's important and what's not, we have to tell it that, right? Sometimes the brain gets it. Sometimes our mind says like, oh, we're nervous because we're going to perform or something like that. We're playing for our teacher. And that's important, and all of a sudden, everything changes in the way we think, right? But when we're sitting on the bench at home, comfortable with our cup of coffee, a candle on, whatever, everything's super cozy, and we sit down to practice, if we just plow through a bunch of measures of music, the brain says, oh, this is nice. We're probably working on sight reading. Maybe. And that depends on even if we're telling the brain that how we're working on sight reading. But if we never tell the mind to actually focus on what we're doing, it's not going to retain much of anything that we put in. So even if we're sitting and putting in a lot of minutes or hours, it can end up translating to very little because we haven't used that time in a way that the brain says, well, I need to remember something. So when we repeat and we repeat and we repeat and we repeat, and we do that over and over and over again, and we continue to think and focus about very particular things. Notes, yes. phrase, yes. What finger is playing? The list could go on and on, right? But when we give those really specific things to focus on, all of a sudden a switch flips in our mind and it says, this is really important. We're spending a lot of effort on this. We're going to pay attention. And then the motor memory gets mapped far more quickly, simply because we've cued the mind to know that it should pay attention. And if we don't cue it, it just goes out the window. It's kind of like short-term memory. I'm sure everybody here, has crammed for an exam or something like that, and you stuff information in short-term memory, and you can get it to stick for like a day, maybe, or a few hours, and you get through what you need to do, and then, think about it a week later, none of it's there. And it happens with music even faster than like typical information. So it'll leave the brain like within minutes. So Nathaniel will say, maybe that's why your sight reading is pretty good, but then sloppy playing. Very much could be, because you end up practicing a lot of reading versus practicing a lot of music. I think you know what I'm talking about. All right. Great question. I think I have covered everybody's questions. I think so. If there's one more, I'll take one more. Otherwise, we can call it a day. It's been a great class. Christopher. Hello, Christopher. Awesome. It's great to see you here. Beautiful. Well, I think I'm not seeing another question come in, so I think we're going to call it a day. I'm glad we got to some questions. We had some really great playing that we got to see earlier today. Yes, by Quentin. Quentin, who had to leave. Quentin is from France, so I'm sure it's definitely late evening over there now. Yeah, really great stuff. So if you haven't and you're new here, please, well, first of all, give the video a thumbs up. Dith, I'll take your question as the last thing. Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. And Anado, yeah, please, as you continue to work on it, feel free to send another video in. FYI, oh, thank you, Sir Woolsey, that is 8 p.m. FYI, video slots for these classes are starting to fill up earlier and earlier, which is awesome, but it also means it might be a little more difficult for all of you to get a slot within a reasonable amount of time. So next week, I already have one submission for next week. Sorry, not next week. Our next class is in 3 weeks. I already have a submission for it. It's some Debussy. It's going to be wonderful to listen to. But I usually only have space for 2 to 3 submissions. So the sooner, I always take them first come, first serve. So the sooner you send me something, and that info is down below in the description, sooner you send me something, the sooner we can get it kind of programmed in and get you featured on the channel and talk about everything. So think about that. Let's see. So Dith said you still, Sir Wolsey, the Debussy is, I can't remember. It's a snow-related piece. I cannot remember the title for the life of me. Thank you, Bethany. It's going to be Bethany playing. Bethany, I'm glad you're still here. So in 3 weeks, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, we will hear Bethany play Debussy's The Snow is Dancing. All right. Going back to Dith's question, you still have to pick your C list piece. Dith, remind me what level you are, and are you picking from the RCM syllabus? Because I can pull that up. Yeah, Sir Woolsey, Debussy Masterclass. Yeah. That would be great. Keep it all on the same topic. That'd be fun. They're going to be quite different pieces of music. Because I think, Sir Wolseley, you're talking about the prelude, the girl with the flaxen hair, right? So, Dith, I'm pulling up level 5. Let's see. A C piece for something fairly contemporary. Oh. Man, there are a lot of good choices. Oh, man. Okay, the composer I'm most drawn to is, see, you're between Harvest and Perrault. Who are the composers of those, Dith? Is it Schumann for the Harvest song? And Beach? Schumann and Beach. All right. The composer I'm most drawn to is Gillick, William Gillick for level C. Gillick writes some really beautiful music, and it's really nice at preparing us to play some more advanced romantic era stuff. So the two from the Lyric Preludes book that are in List C are Gillick's Legend and his Serenade. I love those pieces. In fact, I did a class on Legend on the channel because I like it so much. It's very interesting. It might not quite be your cup of tea, but let me play some of it for you. Gillick's Legend. It's short. I'm already halfway done. So it's got a little bit of dissonance in there, so it's not everybody's cup of tea, but really, really nice piece to work on a variety of feels and some rubato and understanding tension and release. And let's see, Serenade. Where is that? 21. This is also a really lovely piece. Here we go. Sorry about the wrong notes. I get a chance to redeem myself. Second time around. I love that piece. It has some really, it works on different kind of stuff, but we've got some interesting crossing of the hands. And there were places where like a melody note is tied. I let go of it a few times if you saw me replace the note. Melody's tied, but the other hand is crossed over, and we have to hold a tie over pedal changes. Really great stuff to work on. Once again, that helps us play more advanced romantic rep. Phase. So that one is Gillick's Serenade from his, I believe it's 24 lyric preludes in romantic style. Gillick is Gillock. And the book itself, buy the book. Man, the pieces are all really great, and they're all really, really lovely. Well worth. It's like $10, I think, 10 or 15. Absolutely well worth it. Thanks so much, Thomas. I appreciate that. Yeah, so Faze, you said you've heard me speak of him. The book, what's the book is 20, let me tell you for sure. It's called Lyric Preludes in Romantic Style. Subtitle, 24 Short Pieces in All Keys. Really, really, yeah, such good writing. And yeah, so RCM 5, I'd say the whole book is right about that level, probably between level 4 and level 6. So you get some just really lovely pieces in there. And they're all like about 1 page long. Cool. We're going to call it a day. What a great class. Great question to end up on. And I got some sight reading practice in. So thanks, Dith. All right. So we're not going to meet for 3 weeks, actually. So it'll be February 14th will be the next stream. They're always the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month. So we'll see you all on February 14th. And I hope you all have a great rest of January. Hope your new year is off to a wonderful start. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks to everybody for being here. If you haven't given the video a thumbs up, please do that. And if you're new here, you can check out in the description how to send in a video for a masterclass. And, please check out the rest of the channel. That would be great. Practice smarter, not harder. And I will see you all next time. All right, everybody. Take care.